Tell me about this game.
So if you're just joining us, I'm here with Andrew Kincaid, brainchild behind Sentinel, the world's most rapidly growing video game company.
Players want to be in the game. We're closer to that than anyone's ever been before.
I bet you're wondering about now, just what the hell did we do to you?
This is Kincaid Prophecy, the one where you get to be in the world.
People are resistant to the future, but that doesn't stop it from coming.
You'll have 90 minutes to complete each objective, and I can't wait to see you make it through.
We are getting reports of armed men inside National Bank. Please stand by.
This is not right. I sit down and I play this brand new game, and all of a sudden my mission is on the news.
You have to keep playing, Max.
Please tell me that I just killed a bunch of people.
You can't expect everyone to believe in your vision, but when they wake up in a better world, they will thank you for your contribution.
Can you hear me? This is your player. I need your help.
Your husband is a stubborn man.
You underestimated him. He's a survivor.
So you're Sentinel's secret weapon.
What is all this?
I developed a technology that connects you to me. I wanted it to save lives. He wants it to use them.
Creed, go get your wife back.
I chose you because you're the best. You understand the game world, and you understand the rules. Well, you've broken the rules, so that means a penalty.
Why are you doing this?
It's broken. The whole show is broken. In the gamers lays our salvation. This ends now.
The following episode of Film Talk is brought to you by HostGator. HostGator is a leading provider of shared, resold VPS and dedicated hosting solutions. Their award-winning support is available 24/7 via phone, email, and live chat. Discover why over 9 million websites trust HostGator and sign up for a new hosting package using the coupon code GAMEITALL and receive 25% off your first hosting plan. Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of Film Talk on GameItAll.com. I'm here with director Nicholas Gyeney, director of the new sci-fi flick, Beta Test. And first off, right off the bat, thank you very much for joining me here.
Thanks for having me.
And I want to say as well, I got to check out the movie, and it's really cool. I liked it quite a bit. It's really good.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. That's awesome.
And yeah, no, it was really entertaining. And it's such a gamble with movies like this because obviously you're not working with a huge budget right off the bat, right?
Right.
And you've got sort of a special effects driven movie.
Right.
So I mean, I'd say at least 8 times out of 10 it doesn't work out very well in the indie scene. But I thought it like the effects were good and it looked good. It looked like it had a bigger budget than it did. So why don't you tell us first off, then maybe a little bit about the plot and how you kind of came up with the idea for the film.
Sure. I mean, so I guess in a nutshell, the movie is about this video game tester named Max Troy, who's played by Larenz Tate, who's most famous for movies like Crash and the sci-fi Bomb, The Postman with Kevin Costner, which has a special place in my heart. And then, so he's this video game tester who starts testing this new beta from Sentinel, which is our movie versions of like an evil version of Apple meets Microsoft, right? They're like this evil conglomerate company that is the new leader in video game development. And you know, as he starts testing this game, he starts realizing that the events in this video game are creating mirrored events out in the city, and that the main guy, the character that he's playing in this game, is actually a man of flesh and blood that he's controlling via some sort of system, and they have to figure out who's behind it, and why, and stop the whole conspiracy. And so, I structured the movie to be very much like an homage to 90s action movies. You could call it predictable, if you will, but that's kind of intentional. It's pretty much Mario going to save Princess Peach from Bowser's Castle. Like that. That's pretty much the plot of the movie in terms of the structure. And then I tried to basically layer that kind of 90s action homage with some very 21st century relevant themes like gun violence in America and the impact of video game culture in today's society, both of which I feel are very relevant. And so I basically wanted to try and make a low budget action film that's in the same budget level as like these terrible Steven Seagal films and Dolph Lundgren movies that you see coming out, but hopefully kind of inject like a little bit more class or a little bit more depth to what could very easily be just your average throwaway action flick, and I wanted to put a little more heart into it and make it, hopefully a little more enjoyable for audiences.
Yeah, and I want to thank you right off the bat for not letting Steven Seagal get this project. I could only imagine what he would have done.
Maybe Steven Seagal from like 1994 or something. But
yeah, right after Under Siege.
Right after Under Siege, yeah. But sadly, no more. Dolph Lundgren, though, that wouldn't have been bad. I would have had fun with that. But the problem with casting Dolph Lundgren, there's no way to get around this. It comes with the stigma a little bit because he's attached himself to so many of these films that are of subpar quality, right? And Jean-Claude Van Damme, who's another favorite of mine. I mean, I loved all these guys growing up. I grew up on Arnold and Stallone and Dolph Lundgren and Van Damme, and to see their careers kind of go into that direct-to-video territory, and not just direct-to-video territory, but bad direct-to-video territory. It sucks to see that, and I think it's very hard for an actor to climb out of that hole. Jean-Claude did take some good steps in the right direction with JCVD, and shockingly, the last two Universal Soldier movies were actually pretty decent, I thought. But for the most part, these indie action films carry a stigma of being really quite bad, and so my goal with this movie was, if people enjoy it, was to hopefully to change the conversation a little bit, to say these indie action films don't have to be bad as long as we just try a little harder, Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned the themes about gun violence and just like violence in video games and everything. Was that something you had in mind immediately when you were writing the script, or did that come later? Or
well, it's interesting. The I guess the foundation for how the story came about was first I basically decided I wanted to make an indie action film, and I said to myself, how the hell am I going to make an indie action movie that will provide spectacle for an audience that could in any way compete with bigger films that are being released, from studios? What could I possibly do that could compete with that without that budget? I mean, our budget is probably the budget for Michael Bay's trailer, So that's when I came up with the idea of attempting the longest long take fight sequence ever filmed, right? And so that kind of became this, it's kind of shitty to admit this. So I kind of wrote a movie around a fight scene, So first I came up with this long take idea, and then I came up with this gimmick, if you will, of video game action sequences. And what that allowed me to do was to shoot just small little pieces where we would cut to the human side of these action sequences, and pull off action scenes that we would never have the budget to pull off otherwise, that we never actually, in large part, needed to film at all. They were just created in the computer, right? Granted, it's definitely very, very expensive to develop these animated sequences, but because the whole film was developed in Seattle, which is a really big tech community, a lot of video game companies and such, Nintendo is housed here, Microsoft, we were able to kind of woo a lot of these game designers to work on this essentially as a passion project for peanuts compared to what they usually make, because they believed in what I was trying to do. And so we had these top tier video game designers creating an actual video game. So those aren't animated scenes. It's actually a video game engine that they developed for this movie that's fully functioning. And if the movie blows up, we could probably release a video game with a little tweaking.
To test the games.
To test the game. How meta. So I came up with that gimmick of the video game action sequences in basically an effort to to provide an audience with bigger action scenes on an indie budget, right? A lot of these indie films, they try and stretch beyond their means, and they try and, they're masquerading around trying to pretend like they're some kind of James Cameron movie when they could never, afford to be anything in the vicinity of that. So I think the smart approach to indie filmmaking is to write a script that meets your budget. And when you watch beta tests, you'll see, a lot of the film, it takes place in Max's house as he's playing this game, and a big chunk of the film is that. And so, we have these action sequences by a video game to let us, I guess, get away with these bigger action scenes that we wouldn't be able to pull off otherwise. And then, so once that kind of formulated, I guess the philosophy of video game culture starting to trickle in, and then from that, the idea of gun violence, and then the idea of corporate conspiracies and things like that, which I find very fascinating, all kind of came together to make it what it is.
And are you in particular a big gamer?
I'm actually not at all. No, I'm a Mario Kart GoldenEye kind of guy. That's how I describe myself. I have a Nintendo Wii. I've got a PS3. I don't even have a PS4. I grew up playing video game like Mario and stuff with my dad. I played lots of it. But I got to a point where movies became the dominating passion in my life, and I've always respected video game culture. But it was never something that I was devoted to. And that's actually one of the reasons why I thought it'd be so fun to tackle a movie like this, because I felt that if somebody were to get behind to direct a movie about video games who wasn't himself or herself a giant gamer, it might allow for that film to become a little bit more accessible to audiences that might not be gamers themselves. Because if there was somebody who was a hardcore gamer directing this movie, there's a strong chance that it could kind of derail into like very, very techie, geeky kind of plot and dialogue and stuff that people wouldn't even be able to pick up on. And I injected some little geek, things in there like NPCs and stuff like that, which I didn't even know what an NPC was before I wrote the script. So I got help, with that terminology. That I think average audience members will have no idea what that is, but it's okay because they accept that that's his job, and you kind of go along with it, hopefully.
Well, yeah, and the reason I mainly asked was there's one joke in particular in the script that I thought was very very much for the avid video game players, is when the scene in the bank where he comes in and says he says, "Hey, baby," as the first line, because all a lot of people play video games, they select the most ridiculous option first, right? It's kind of like, let's hit on the teller. Like it would make no sense in the real world, but that's why it's so funny, because he says that.
That's awesome. That's actually really funny. That wasn't my intention. My intention was just to try and, my intention was just to try and create a moment of levity there. And I guess it's awesome that'll that connected with the gamer.
Yeah, no, because I know there's a lot of games where, you meet like a female character, and one of the options is to flirt with her, like almost every game.
That's funny. That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, hey, that's great.
Also, you have two great actors in the lead as well. You have, like you said Larenz Tate, and also Manu Bennett from Arrow.
Right.
What was the casting process like landing those two guys?
With Manu, I actually had just finished watching season 1 and 2 of Arrow when I started developing beta test, and I thought, and I didn't really know who he was prior to that, and I just thought he was such a great presence on screen that and a great kind of like rising talent that I started developing the character with him in mind, and I sent the script just over to his agent. Pitching that idea that I kind of wrote this for Manu. Hopefully he likes it, and thankfully he did. He really liked the idea, and he was a great creative partner in the shooting of the movie. He came up with cool little lines here and there, and then Larenz I think was the last person we actually cast. Larenz was busy with this TV show, and we were trying to work out scheduling, and so it came down to the wire in getting him kind of locked in on board. And then Lyndon Ashby, who plays the villain Kincaid, is actually a childhood favorite of mine. He played Johnny Cage in Mortal Kombat, and I that was kind of intentional. I wanted to have some meta references in there, and I thought it'd be interesting to cast the star of arguably the most successful video game movie ever made. I guess if you don't count Warcraft's international tally, but Mortal Kombat was, as cheesy as it is kind of a beloved, cult adaptation, right? And so I thought it'd be interesting to cast the lead of one of these famous video game movies as the villain in a movie that tackles video game culture, in the 21st century. So, we got very lucky with that cast for sure.
That's funny because he didn't even look like Johnny Cage, so I didn't even think about that. But I mean, that's really cool.
Yeah, he's also on Teen Wolf right now. He's a star on Teen Wolf, the TV show.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, 1 second here.
Sure.
Okay, so the special effects. Going back to the special effects, then, what kind of process was that in nailing down like kind of what you wanted, and were there a lot of problems with the logistics of all of the special effects and how it was going to look?
Oh, actually, it was a really, really, really tough process. This was my first movie dealing with any kind of VFX. I've been taking kind of big steps up in terms of budget and or baby steps forward in terms of budget in my career. But this is the first time that I've dealt with all this kind of. There were like 675 VFX shots in this movie, which is crazy. It's crazy for a lot of big films. I think in Phantom Menace had like 900 or something like that. Just by comparison. So I knew it was super ambitious. I didn't actually know if we were gonna pull this off. And I got very lucky with finding these artists and animators who kind of came together and made it work for me. The issue was that a lot of these artists had never worked for a filmmaker before, had never worked in a film before, and the structure of their work environment when they're developing video games is a lot different than the structure in finishing a film. When you're finishing a film, the deadlines I think are way more unrealistic. And you're basically on an indie film asking people to work twice as hard as they'd normally work for half the money. And, as the filmmaker behind it, you always feel really bad asking people to do all this hard work for you for less money. But you just hope that when they sign on to the project that they can find something to be passionate about in it, and hope that it'll lead to something bigger down the road, right? And so we ran into issues with actually, we had to create basically animatics of every little sequence, and fine tuning those and getting those right just took a lot of back and forth, and finally, we actually went out and put a GoPro on my head, and I mimicked actions and things like that to kind of help them, and some very minor storyboarding and stuff. But a lot of that prep work was minimized as much as possible, because we were trying to maximize every dollar, and so if we could get away with not doing a storyboard for this or that, that was preferred, just because of the costs, that would incur, right? Every dollar counts in a movie like this, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing too, when you have bigger name actors, like the three you mentioned, like they've been in a lot of movies. And also Larenz Tate, I thought he was like 25 years old, but then I said he's been in movies for such a long time, right. But he does not look his age at all.
He's
especially
babyface.
Yeah. But what I was gonna say is, you have actors like this doing an independent film. They obviously, like, if they're doing it for half the money, I think you have to be passionate about it, because if you don't want to do it, they just won't do it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I mean,
yeah. I mean, I think I got lucky with finding the right. I think we found the right cast, and we find the right crew to put this thing together.
Yeah. And did that sorry. having these particular actors in it, did that help a bit? Like when you were trying to get financing and stuff like that?
Oh, well, actually, it was financed before they signed on. But basically, when I was approaching the investors with the plan, I had this kind of wish list of actors that we wanted to approach. Manu was on that list, Lyndon was on that list, Larenz was on that list, and we got lucky getting those three. I think the real key to getting a film financed is obviously you got to develop a script, but you need to have a really strong pitch and a really strong business plan.
All right, and I want to mention a movie you did previously called, I'm just looking this up here, it's called Matt's Chance.
Right.
Now that one you were writer, director, and producer on, is that right?
Right.
And you had Ed Furlong,
Yeah.
Lee Majors,
Right.
Margot Kidder, Gary Busey. I just want to ask you, on this film, did you get a chance to sleep?
Yeah, that's funny you say that. That was a crazy experience. I dealt with a lot of crazy on that one. It was a really memorable experience because I really just threw myself into the fire dealing with a lot of very quirky personalities on that thing. And I think as a filmmaker and as a producer, I think it strengthens you moving forward to kind of tackle obstacles, that would come up. We also had Marshawn Lynch in that movie. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but that was a big deal for Seattle where we shot the movie. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah, there's a photo of you on the internet with him at a premiere.
Yeah, he brought like the whole Seahawks team to the premiere in Seattle. That was kind of cool.
I just pictured like the actors. I just pictured them all together in a room, and just seemed like a crazy situation.
Yeah, I mean that's a great way to describe that movie, and I guess it works out that it's a dark comedy, So that whole experience was a dark comedy.
Cool. Now I just want to clarify. I just want to make sure now with beta test. That is, what's the release date on that?
So it hits U.S. theaters on July 22nd. It's going to be opening in about 20 theaters to start with. I'm not really expecting it to go bigger. I mean, we could get really lucky and people could come see it. I hope they do. But I really was trying to design this limited theatrical release to just kind of essentially market the VOD home video release that's going to come down the road. With these kind of indie action films, again, you can never predict what box office would be like, but in this market, it really is a marketing tool, for what comes next.
Okay, so and that's going to be in 20 theaters around the California or Seattle area?
So just off the top of my head, we've got a couple in the Seattle area, San Francisco, LA, Phoenix, Arizona, Denver, Colorado, Detroit, Michigan, New York, Washington, D.C., Florida, Louisiana. I mean, we hit all this. I guess we did a little nice circumference around the country, and a couple in the middle. So
right around the Bible Belt.
Right around.
Okay, so I guess just to finish this off, then I'm just going to ask you: is there any type of film or story you've always kind of wanted to direct or write that you haven't gotten the chance to yet?
Well, there's a big bust of Arnold Schwarzenegger behind me as the Terminator.
I just noticed that.
I'm a huge Terminator fan. I would love to do like a proper final Terminator film. I think it would be a really cool idea for a sixth Terminator movie. I'd also love to do a remake of Highlander. Oh God, both of those are gestating projects. And if beta test takes off, then I hope that it'll allow me the opportunity to have those meetings.
Yeah.
But I have so many different types of films that I'm developing. I've got a horror superhero film that I have in my pocket, like a modern action western, a bunch of different types of films that I just write when they come to me.
That's really surprising. There's never been a Highlander remake yet.
Right? I know. That's what I'm saying, man. Like, the time is now.
All right, well, I want to thank Nicholas Gyeney very much for stopping by and talking about beta test, which you said July 22nd. in limited theaters, and then afterwards on video on demand release.
DVD, all that stuff.
Okay, and that's TBA. That's like a later date.
Yeah, it's going to be coming shortly after.
Okay, perfect. So, yeah, again, thank you very much.
Thank you.